Good morning and happy Mother's Day weekend. So, I wanted to share my views on patriarchy and colonization since it wants to always be this major topic and everything and like drilled into your brain continuously on this endless loop. So today I'm going to talk about it from my point of view, and it will be the only time that I give my point of view on this. So here we go. I did a lot of sitting and a lot of reading, found some articles, thought about some of the tools. As a traditional witch, I am only coming from the point of view of me as a traditional witch. That is also my point of view of being a traditional witch. It's not anybody else's. It's not yours. It's not yours. It's not yours. It's mine. Okay? Take from it what you will. Give it a little thought. That's all I'm asking. So patriarchy shapes nearly every historical narrative about witchcraft. And yes, I am reading because I wrote down exactly what I wanted to say. Call it a script. You don't like it, whatever. So patriarchy shapes nearly every historical narrative about witchcraft. From who was accused, to why, to how, the figure of the word witch became a tool for controlling women. Patriarchal societies weaponized religion and law to define witches as threats, especially in foundational texts like the Malleus Maleficarum from 1847, which framed women as morally weak and inherently susceptible to demonic influence. This framing was part of a broader system that used cultural symbols to justify subjugation. Am I crooked? I think I am just a little, but whatever. So witchcraft accusations became a mechanism for enforcing gender norms, especially in communities where women held informal power as healers, midwives, counselors. Now, these roles were respected for centuries before the patriarchal institutions began targeting them. That's not saying they weren't already there. That was before they started targeting these specific, positions that women held. So roughly 80 to 85% of accused and executed individuals in Europe were women. This is a statistic that makes clear the gendered nature of the persecutions. Now, scholars describe the witch hunts as an organized mass violence against women, even if not the exaggerated millions sometimes claimed. The violence was systematic, and it was not incidental. In many regions, including parts of India today, witchcraft accusations still function as tools of patriarchal control, often targeting widows, poor women, or women who challenge male authority, which I think is the biggest thing right now. In colonial North America, witchcraft accusations were embedded in a broader patriarchal order that shaped gender roles among settlers, native peoples, and enslaved Africans. Patriarchy here wasn't just misogyny. It was a whole system of power that intersected with race and colonial domination. Feminist scholars and artists reinterpret the witch as a symbol of resistance against patriarchal oppression, drawing on thinkers like Matilda Jocelyn Gage, Mary Daly, Sylvia Federici. These interpretations highlight how the witch figure exposes the intersections of gender, power, and social control. Contemporary feminist movements reclaim the witch archetype as a symbol of empowerment, flipping the patriarchal narrative that once demonized women's autonomy. Across cultures and centuries, the witch has been a projection of patriarchal fears about women's autonomy, a justification for controlling women's labor, sexuality, and knowledge, a cultural symbol used to punish deviation from gender norms, a site where gender, power, and violence converge. This is why scholars argue that witchcraft history is women's history, even when earlier historians tried to deny the gendered nature of the persecutions. Now, the reference from this, I have 5 of them. From ijor.co.uk, the article Hexing the Patriarchy, Reclaiming the Witch Archetype for Feminism. The second one is from JSTOR. The article is On Studying Witchcraft as Women's History, a historiography of the European witch persecutions. The third is from journalpress.com, Chasing Shadows, Witch Hunting as a Mirror of Cultural Horror and Patriarchy. The fourth one is from Oxford Academic, Women as Witches, Witches as Women, Witchcraft and Patriarchy in Colonial North America. The fifth is Academia EDU, Feminist Interpretations of Witches and the Witch Craze in Contemporary Art. Now, we're going to get more into colonization, colonialism, that stuff. So, a traditional witch, me, can handle the colonial deconstruction, because you're hearing a lot about that. You need to deconstruct from colonization in your witchcraft tradition. So that's basically what I'm talking about here. But it requires clarity about what you are deconstructing, what you're preserving, and what you're refusing to carry forward. The tension is real. Okay, traditional witchcraft often draws from our European folkways, okay? While colonial deconstruction asks you to examine how those same traditions were shaped, filtered, or weaponized through colonial power structures. You're basically asking yourself, how do I practice something old without unconsciously repeating the harms that came with it? And that's not to say that everything in traditional witchcraft is old, or we'll get into that. The first thing is you want to separate folk tradition from the colonial distortion. Colonialism didn't just conquer the land. It rewrote spiritual histories. And as a traditional witch, I can start by asking myself, which parts of my practice come from pre-Christian, pre-colonial folkway? Which parts were reframed by the church, empire, or Victorian occultism? Which parts were invented by modern authors who claimed ancient origins? Now, I'm not talking about throwing anything away, okay? I'm talking about knowing what you're holding. An example would be European cunning craft existed long before the colonial empires, okay? But the image of the witch as demonic, evil, or exotic was shaped by those empires. Deconstruction means you stop letting colonial narratives define what your tradition is. See, that this is a lot of the stuff that people just want to you know, you need to decolonize, all this kind of stuff, the patriarchy, that's paid. But I don't hear any help beyond that. So the second one would be stop treating European folk magic as the universal template. Traditional witchcraft is valid, okay? But it is not the world's default. And colonial thinking often assumes that European means is original. That other cultures, that means exotic or primitive or superstitious. And that European witchcraft means the model that everyone should follow. A decolonizing traditional witch rejects that hierarchy. I can honor my own lineage without claiming it as the center of the magical universe. The third one would be respect boundaries with living indigenous and African diasporic traditions. Now, this is where some may get tripped up. So, decolonization means here not mixing closed practices into your craft, not claiming universal shamanism, not borrowing spirits, deities, or rituals from cultures that have been harmed by colonialism, and not assuming that you can learn indigenous magic from books or TikTok. I can be a traditional witch without reenacting the extractive behavior of empire. The fourth, reclaim the parts of your tradition that colonial Christianity demonized. So colonial systems demonized midwives, herbalists, cunning folk, women with autonomy, queer people, folk healers, and animistic worldviews. They were savage. So deconstruction means reclaiming these roles on your own terms, not through the lens of church courts or Victorian occultists. The one thing I have not been hearing about is putting things under that title of, you know, what the Victorian occultists thought or did. The fifth, understand that tradition is not static. It's a living lineage. I'm not a museum curator. No matter the books I have, no matter the tools I prefer to make, I can make them all I want to from what I read from history, but I cannot recreate exactly what it was because, number one, materials, they're not here. That was there. It's not the same stuff here. Now, I can order that from there, but that would not be doing anything like doing my path from my land. So I'm not a museum curator. Tradition evolves, okay? Colonialism freezes culture in time and says, this is authentic. Decolonization says tradition grows because people grow. So I can keep my folk magic. I can keep my spirits. I can keep my land-based practices. I can keep my ancestral methods while still removing the colonial overlays that were never mine to begin with. And then rebuild your relationship with land, not the empire, the land you're on, or the land of your life. Traditional witchcraft is land rooted. Colonialism is land extractive. To deconstruct colonial influence, I can, learn the ecological history of the land that I live on. I can understand which plants are native versus the colonial imports. I can avoid using endangered or culturally sacred plants. I can build relationships with my local ecosystems rather than imported symbolism. So this is one of the most powerful ways to decolonize a craft without abandoning your tradition. 7, examine power, not just aesthetics. Colonial deconstruction isn't about guilt. It's about power. So you can ask, who benefits from this belief that I have? Who gets erased by the story I tell? Who gets harmed if I repeat this practice without context? And who gets centered? And who gets silenced? And number 8, keep your tradition, but practice it consciously. I don't have to abandon traditional witchcraft to decolonize it. I just have to practice it with awareness, with humility, with historical literacy, with respect for other cultures, and with clarity about my lineage, and my refusal to reenact extraction or domination. That's how I become a responsible witch. I love to learn about other cultures. I feel that's how I show them respect, okay? By knowing, by understanding who they are, where they're from, why they do what they do. You know, this is why I have some of my books. This is why I took cultural anthropology in college. That's why the way I am. Okay, I don't read these things to use them. I read about something they did, and then like a plant that does such and such. So what is the same kind of plant that I can find the same qualities of where I live? See, that's how I do that. So some simple tools and ingredients that you may think are neutral, but they are products of colonization, empire, or Victorian exoticism. Now, a couple of these we already know, maybe more than a couple. The first one, of course, is going to be white sage. Salvia apiana. White sage. We all know this one. We know that it's sacred to several indigenous nations. It is also over-harvested due to New Age demand. It is popularized by 20th century occultists who stripped it from its cultural context. Now, the colonial pattern here, which I will be doing for each one, the colonial pattern here is extraction and commodification and erasure. The decolonized alternative to white sage for me would be rosemary, pine, cedar, mugwort, juniper, and you've seen me use those. The second one would be Palo Santo. Now, I have a Palo Santo. I did not purchase the Palo Santo. It was given to me years ago. Okay? Years ago. Now, this comes from indigenous South American traditions. It is over-harvested and it is endangered in some regions. And it is marketed as a universal, that's the word, universal cleansing wood by Western spiritual industries. Now, the colonial pattern here is resource exploitation and spiritual appropriation. So what is the decolonized alternative that I do? Oak, pine, cedar, or resins. Now, these two resins They also need to be ethically sourced. Frankincense and copal. The third one is these smudging kits. Smudging kits that are sold online. Smudging is a specific indigenous ceremony. This is not smudging, okay? That is a particular ceremony. It's not just waving that little wand of sage around. That's not smudging, okay? Kits are mass produced by non-indigenous sellers. The rituals are stripped of any kind of cultural meaning and sold as aesthetic tools. The colonial pattern here is commodifying sacred practices. The decolonized alternative. This is what I do. I call my practice smoke cleansing. And I use herbs from my own tradition or from my land. Next one. Crystals with colonial supply chains. Now, I have not bought a crystal. I don't even remember the last crystal I got. I have been given random ones that people have found. Like my son, when he used to work at a place that had to do with taking the parts from old automobiles and reselling them, he would find some in vehicles. I have gotten those. I guess you would say I adopted those. Just random, not bought anywhere from anybody. But now the top examples of these crystals, you probably have a lot of these because these are the ones that are they're the big top sellers. They're the ones that people recognize the most. They're the ones that people want the most. Therefore, they are overmined. We have clear quartz, amethyst, rose quartz, selenite, labradorite, and obsidian. I know some people are going, whatever. The reason why it's those is what I just told you. Because they are in high demand from people because they are more well known than other ones. And why are they colonial? Because many of these crystals come from mines with child labor, with unsafe conditions, or indigenous land theft. And when they get them, everything is, the land is left in this upheaval so that you can have your beautiful crystals. The crystal boom is driven by our Western demand. The colonial pattern for this is resource extraction and exploitation. So, what is the decolonized alternative? Buy from local miners. Ones that live in those areas, that mine their crystals on their own and sell them to you. I use more river stones and shells and bones and clay or found rocks. You've seen this. I use fewer crystals and more of my intention instead. If they're bigger crystals, they're sitting somewhere and they probably have dust on them. The smaller ones are in a box that I pretty much don't open very often. So that's that. Number 5, imported resins and incense. Some examples of these, like I was saying with frankincense and copal, I'm talking about imported. Frankincense, myrrh, copal, and dragon's blood. Imported. So why is that colonial? Many are harvested in ways that harm ecosystems. Some are tied to the colonial trade routes and often marketed without any kind of cultural context. The colonial pattern for this is exoticism and resource extraction. The decolonized alternative, use your local resins. For me, that would be pine resin. I have wild cherry trees here. I sometimes can get, cherry resin from that. It is powerful. It comes from your land or your area, and it is abundant here in Florida. So find out what resins are abundant in your state or area. You have some, I'm pretty sure. 6, here we go. Tarot decks with appropriated imagery. Now, why is this colonial? Some have voiced concern that many decks are borrowing from symbols. They're borrowing symbols from cultures that the creator does not belong to. Like the creator of deck is taking symbols from another culture and they don't belong to that culture. Some have used stereotype depictions of African, indigenous, or Asian cultures. Stereotyped is the operative word. The colonial pattern is aesthetic appropriation. The decolonized alternative. So what can I do? If you're interested in making an attempt at this, use decks rooted in your own lineage or created by the cultures that they depict. Okay? An African or an African American creating a deck from their own culture. An indigenous culture creating a deck from their own culture. An Asian culture creating a deck from their own culture. That's what that means. Otherwise, they're making money off that other culture. Shamanic tools sold to non-shamans. Now, these are tools like drums that are marketed as shaman drums. Rattles using indigenous designs that they are not part of that culture. Feathers from protected birds. We should all know this. Now, why is it colonial if you can't understand it as it is? Shaman is a specific Siberian term. Western occultism turned it into a generic label. So like shamanism is now universal. Tools are often copied from closed traditions. The colonial pattern here is flattening of a culture and mislabeling and theft. The decolonized alternative, I use folk tools from my own tradition. As a witch, number 1 would be a besom. Of course, that belongs to no one else. Iron nails, keys, knives, bowls, stones, herbs, stuff I create from my own land. I can take an idea of a tool, use my own native, my own land's resources, but I may, if there's a symbol on it or something, I create that. See, that's that. And I don't call it just generic shaman. I like to learn about shamanism from all the cultures, as you saw through my books. I have quite a few shamanistic titles. All right. Essential oils. Why is this colonial? So many oils, we know, if you know how an oil is made like that, that requires a massive amount of plant material. A massive amount. And they're often produced through exploitative labor. And they're marketed as ancient when they're an industrial product. The colonial pattern here is industrial extraction disguised as spirituality. The decolonized alternative, use whole herbs, infused oils, or local plants. I do a lot of infused oils. Can I call them an essential oil? No, because I'm not extracting that oil from that plant material. I'm infusing an oil with that plant material. 9, spirit animals and totems. These are specific indigenous cultural concepts. Western witchcraft uses them as a generic archetype, and they're often stripped of their original meaning, and they're sold as some kind of personality quiz. Okay? We've all took those. You know you have. The colonial pattern here is cultural flattening. Decolonized alternative. Use animal allies. I've said animal allies. I've said plant allies. Or folk animal symbolism from your own culture. Animals that you see around you, not a general list of ones. Books that claim a universal authority. We're looking at the universal part here, such as one called The Witch's Bible. What kind of witch? Where is this witch from? The complete book of magic. There is no complete book of magic. And Victorian occult texts. And New Age books claiming ancient secrets. Which probably, where is that? They don't say ancient secrets. This one says secret wisdom. And this is occult societies and arcane knowledge through the ages. But this is like the history of what is known of secret occult societies. Okay? Let's see. Now, why is this colonial? It presents one's culture magic as universal. Like the term traditional witch is not even universal. I can just, this is traditional witchcraft from my point of view. It's land rooted, so it would be from my land, not land in the next state, not land overseas, my land. It erases the diversity of global traditions. We're very diverse. We are not the same. We are not universal. It's often written by white authors who borrowed from colonized cultures. Now, the colonial pattern here is epistemic dominance. The decolonized alternative. Use your regional folklore. In some places that can be very hard. Okay, you have to do a lot of research, and sometimes there's just not, like witches here in Florida, they are few and far between, or any kind of written knowledge of them, actually. Oral histories and your own ancestral traditions. We're talking not exactly, I'm not meaning like any kind of witches in your ancestry line. If you do have some, great, use that. But we're talking about their belief systems. What did they hold when they came over here and used in the context of where they were living then? You don't have to go throw everything away. Okay? Don't go throw everything away. You just need to see clearly where it's coming from. That's it. Where did it come from? Who benefits from me having this, or who benefits this person that's selling it? Who was harmed? Was there child labor? Did they harm the land doing it? Is it over harvest? Is it endangered? Are they stealing? Is this mine? Is it my tradition that I'm following? Is it my culture? Do I understand the culture? Is this ethical? Is this extractive? And is this respectful? You're not going to lose any of your like witchiness, your power from doing this. You are looking to self-govern. You want to control your choices. I want to control my choices. I want to be make more of a conscious choice of what if I'm buying it from someone else or somewhere else off Etsy, anywhere. And you want to reclaim your own energy. That's I make a lot of my stuff because I'm putting my energy into it. Okay, I'm not taking someone else's energy or not even their energy. All they did was, steal this and put it in front of you. But, put your own energy. It's just being more conscious of where your stuff is coming from, where your thoughts are coming from, where your learning is coming from. That's it. So I just thought that needed a little bit more clarity, because a lot of the times you're just hearing patriarchy and colonialism and colonization is just being thrown at you. And it's like, okay, but what does that mean? Okay. It's just calmly, instead of giving angry tones and throwing shit at people, just come from your point of view, from your area of the world, from your area of the United States, wherever it's from, and give your, your ideas and stuff. You don't have to be angry to do this, okay? Chill. Make it easier for someone to understand. So until next video, I'll see you then.